Hello, I'm back after a few months of just trying to focus on work. I figured I'd film a little video today. It's a nice Sunday evening. Things have been going pretty well. Today, I wanted to talk about how I landed my first architecture internship. Normally, I kind of assume architect students wouldn't make such a big deal about it, let alone film a video for it. But it's kind of important for me for two reasons. The first is that it kind of validated my place in the architecture community to give me, the hope that, hey, I actually have these skills that are decent enough to get a job. And two, it is obviously special to get a job and lucky to get a job, especially at the firm that I worked in. It's a world recognized firm. And to be completely honest, I lost my NDA, so I don't know if I could actually say the name of the company. But they are one of the leading and largest firms in the world. They've designed things like the Burj Khalifa, they've designed the Royal Rolex Towers in Dubai, and they do a lot of international, but definitely a lot of national projects in the United States. So, for the sake of confidentiality, I'm going to leave it at that. So, in this video, I want to do three things. First, I want to describe how I actually got my internship position. Number two, I want to describe what a typical internship might look like based on my experience and just words of friends. And number three, I want to discuss my kind of takeaways and what I've learned that I apply to my current position, and also you can apply to future and to your schoolwork, in fact. This is all to hopefully give you an idea of what the reality is when you are a student, so you're still learning, but you're also in the professional environment. One thing that I kind of regret is that I didn't take an internship opportunity, or I didn't apply for an internship when I was an undergrad. I waited to the end of my first year in grad school. But I think an internship is incredibly valuable and you should do it as early as possible. So, with that, I'm going to jump right into my condensed story about how I got my internship. So, it was the end of my first, it was about the middle of my first year in grad school, and I was a member of the Black Student Alliance at my university. And they had arranged for a portfolio review with this specific firm. The people at the review were actually alumni of our university, and in fact, a decent amount of alumni from our university end up working at the New York office of this firm. So we had that connection. I went to that review with a few of my friends from the BSA, and they gave some great tips, some great advice how to improve my portfolio. And I mean, I won't say that it was the best portfolio because it definitely wasn't, but I took those tips and I applied it. And the thing that they said before the review was over is that, hey, we have this internship coming up in the summer. Fix up your stuff, fix up your resume, apply, and once you've applied, send us an individual email and let us know. My assumption is that they will kind of like talk to HR and, be like, hey, I've met this person. They're a great person. Their work looks really good, that kind of thing. So that's exactly what happened. I fixed up my work, sent it in, sent them an email saying, hey, I applied. And that's how it kind of went down. And this internship didn't require any interview at all. So I just did it by the book, and then I got the position. The reason that I share that is to be completely transparent, is that that's kind of honestly how architecture works. In architecture, if you have a internal connection, you're kind of given an advantage in getting a position that you want. On one hand, I think it's good because to have somebody on the inside who can attest to your personality, maybe your work ethic, somebody who can be like, hey, I've met this person, they're really personable. It would be great to hire them, and that they know that you are a good face for the company. I think it makes sense, it's solid, it's logical. On the other hand, obviously, not everybody has the ability and the opportunity to have that connection or to form a network like that. So if you might be amazingly talented, equally talented or more talented than any of your peers, But just because you don't know there's an architect on the inside, you're given a bit of a disadvantage in terms of job opportunities. A lot of the times in firms, there's referral programs. So if you are somebody working in an office and you refer a new hire, a new candidate who's past 3 months working in the office, you'll usually get a bonus. So that's kind of another incentive for people to form connections in and outside of firms, and for people in firms to kind of help out people who are looking for work. The main takeaway I want you to get from me telling this story is the importance of jumping at opportunities. I wouldn't have got this job if I had not been a member of the BSA and if I had not taken my day or evening to go to this portfolio review. Obviously, I wouldn't have known about the internship if I hadn't gone. I wouldn't have known that we had such strong connections if I hadn't gone. So it's important to jump at opportunities and to form connections with people. The other thing that I'll mention is that schools sometimes organize special guest lectures to come in and talk about topics or their work or different fields to their guest and their audience. And if it's not offered by schools, it might be local organizations or the city. I say if you have a free evening, you have nothing to do, go to them. I really urge you, because at the very least, you'll just learn something that's not something you already know. And at the very most, you'll form a connection with somebody. As somebody who's a little bit shy, going to these things, especially alone, it might dissuade me, but you'll always gain something. And if it's not you having a conversation with the person beside you and just introducing yourself, saying, hey, my name is blah, blah, blah. What's your name? What do you do? Do you know this person who's talking? What kind of relevant things do they do? And like, can we connect? You can do that, or you can actually ask questions to the lecturer, or you can go down usually at the end of the lecture, they'll let you talk to them in person. You can meet them and you can form connections. So I think it's important to network that way. It might sound a little bit like an awkward situation, but I think at the very least, you're getting an opportunity and taking the risk to meet somebody, and you put yourself in such a strong advantage in terms of guiding your own career path. So the second thing I wanted to go into is what an internship experience might look like. So this is obviously based on mine. And based on some experiences of my friends and my peers. But I will say that, first off, not all internships are the same, but internships by definition are usually structured. So they usually run under a short time period. For example, mine was 2 months flat. They might go up to 6 months, maybe they might go up to a year. So a little bit about my own experience was that mine was 2 months. It was a series of guided and structured activities. We were 12 hired students, from a lot of us domestic to the United States, but some international. And Monday to Thursday, we worked on our project teams. And usually like each intern had separate teams, so you wouldn't really work with another intern. And then Friday was our kind of intern activity day. And that was fun. So we would do like a site visit, or we'd have a workshop, or we'd spend the whole day just kind of like working on projects. I remember the last couple weeks of our internship, we used, I think, the Thursday and Friday every week to work on this big project. We worked in teams. We had to design a structure. We had to build it, and then we had to test its structural strength. So that was really fun. I have videos for that, and that was a great time. So the thing is, not all internships are like that. I've heard from friends who've been on like 6 months internships where they've had to pretty much work the solid amount of time. It wasn't a internship that gave them learning opportunities in a structured way, but they were asked to work solid, build models, attend client meetings, help with design, work in CAD, work in Revit for that solid amount of time. And I think it's very good to have a little bit of a structured internship. Obviously, I'll say that it's very good because that's the internship that I had. But my internship was in a way that I learned a little bit of everything, and I did a little bit of everything. So yeah, I did attend client meetings. I did get involved in site visits. I got involved in planning and design. And I was kind of asked to do one of everything. So it was a really good experience for me. In terms of work hours, I also know that varies. My internship, because it was structured and because it was in this big firm, they only allowed internships to work up to 40 hours. And in fact, they would be mad at you if you worked past, 6 p.m. or if they saw, worse of all, if they saw that you put overtime on your timesheets, they would be upset. Not internships are like that, obviously. I've heard, people having interns working like 60 hours a week and, going home at midnight. That tends to be a thing when you're in a smaller firm who has less staff, or potentially, smaller projects where they would invest more time and more energy into specific projects. In terms of pay, I say that I was very well paid, but I suppose the rationale was that not only are we asked to displace and move to New York, which is, obviously quite expensive to live, but some of us were international, so they'd have to pay for you to move your whole life to a city for 2 months, have to deal with the MTA, have to deal with all a million things. And then obviously you need to have a little bit of money to live. So I was paid well and I had a little bit of money that I was able to save for school, and then still some spending money and some live money. Generally, big firms are like that. They tend to pay the most. And the correlation is that the smaller the firm means the smaller project budgets, the smaller amount of staff, and the more work you'll end up kind of doing. But the larger the firm is, the larger project budgets, the more staff, and the more you'll get paid, to be completely honest. So the final thing I'll mention is the interaction with other regular staff and also employee activities. So usually as an intern, you won't get benefits, so don't try to count on that. But what that means that if you are a salaried employee, you can usually be paid more at the cost of not having benefits. Interacting with staff, well, obviously they kind of look at you as like a temporary employee because you're going to be gone in just a few months. But it obviously never hurts to get to know people, be friendly, and to form connections that you could potentially use or have in the future. So always remember that. Then, depending on the size of your firm, you might have something called lunch and learns, which is something that I was kind of floored to learn about. They are when your firm or your company brings in a professional. So that might be a consultant, a licensure professional, it might be a product designer, whoever. And they come and they talk to staff and educate staff on what they want to present. And it's usually over the lunch kind of hour. I think that whether you are an employee or you're just a intern, always try to go to these things, at least go to one or two, because number one, you'll learn something. Number two, you actually get to add these hours to your licensure when you're trying to become licensed architect. And number three, they usually come with free lunch. So go. So finally, I'm going to talk about the takeaways and what I have and intend to apply to the future. So I really appreciated my internship experience because it gave me a practical taste of what it's like to be an architect. Because up until that point, I was, 6 years into studying about architecture and only in the theoretical part of that field and that discipline. So I got a taste of what it was to make money and design things, do practical things in this field. It was a field that I had at that point invested 6+ years into. I invested thousands of my own dollars, of my family's money. So it was kind of a validation to know that I had made somewhat of a correct choice. Still to this day, I also know some of my peers question that, simply because we've put in so much work and you don't see any of it until you are an actual working architect. So having an internship experience gives you that little bit of a stepping stone into what it might look like because of all the effort that you put in. That also being said, the internship taught me how important it was to find what you love about architecture, because you can really easily get into a world where all you're doing is designing things for clients that you don't care about, the product you don't care about, the the money value is just money and it's just income for you. But if you have solid and immovable values, then you will seek opportunities that align with those values. During my internship, the project that I spent the most time on was this condominium development with a tower and like shopping in this expensive city halfway across the world for clients that were rich. And I did not care about it. It was not something that made me wake up in the morning and get me excited to show up. I complained a lot that I didn't want to work on this, simply because it wasn't at all aligning to my values or my interests. I love community engagement. I love hearing firsthand what communities need and what they want. And I love learning about equity and challenges that communities have and how architecture can help to improve those communities and address those needs. And specifically for communities that are displaced and populations that are displaced, Black communities, homeless communities, I like looking at data to inform the way that we design. And the project that I worked on was not aligning with those values. But as an intern, you don't really have that choice, You're probably also not at the point where you've developed that thinking as to know where you want to go. And you definitely don't have the position to guide your own projects only as an intern in a firm. I've also realized that as an architect, you also have very little say. Unless you run the company yourself, you don't really get a chance to do what you want. Because at the end of the day, it is about money. And the projects that make the most money are the big skyscrapers and the big condominium developments and the malls and, infrastructure projects. They're not community centers. They're not schools. They're not, affordable housing. And that's simply how our world works. And I really wish it wasn't. So don't get me wrong at all. I love that experience because I got to learn so many different skills. I became a master in Revit. I got a little bit better in CAD. I learned Enscape, all these different rendering softwares. And I obviously learned a lot of more architecture terminology that I hadn't known in school. Like I never knew what an RFI was. I never knew about, CD, DD, SD. I didn't know about any of these things. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't taken this job and I haven't done this internship. I also wouldn't have known what direction I want to do in the future if I hadn't worked in a project. And I don't mean to put this project down at all. Obviously, it's important. But if I hadn't worked in a project that I learned that I didn't like, I wouldn't have learned what I do like. I think one of the most important takeaways from all this is that you shouldn't be afraid to ask for opportunities. In my internship, even though it was as structured as it was, there were a couple client meetings that as an intern, I wasn't really supposed to attend, but I had actually asked to be a part of, simply because I knew it was an opportunity for me to learn something practical and to see kind of the ins of what a discussion like that looks like. And a good leader will accommodate that and will recognize opportunities for their staff to grow and become better resources for their projects. So it's worth their investment as much as it's worth yours. So that essentially comes, full circle. It comes back to the idea of creating opportunities, finding opportunities for yourself to grow. And not only that, make connections so everybody recognizes the value of each other's learning and each other's skills. And that's it. So that is basically my video on how I landed my first really big internship. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was informative. And I really do hope you take things like networking and seizing opportunities and learning about yourself while in the field as takeaways from this whole video and apply them in your future career and also as a student. I hope to see you in the next video, and thank you for watching.